Yeah. So I just want to really underscore and appreciate each of us in our own awkward, for me, awkward way of how the fuck do I communicate this? This is the most difficult topic ever. This is entire cultures being decimated, wiped off the planet. And right now, we have more capability of doing that than ever before.
Yeah, yeah,
And so that's what I meant by the real deal. And I think that's what each of you has meant
yeah.
by the words that you've chosen. So
Well,
I just want to point out the white hot
yeah.
core of this conversation. It just doesn't get any more uh, toxic and disorienting for me
Right.
than to be approaching this. And I'm deeply, in an odd way, I'm deeply appreciating being able to have this conversation with y'all.
Oh,
Because I sure as heck can't have this conversation with 99% of the people I speak with.
Yeah.
And I find it kind of funny, I find it kind of sad. The dreams in which I'm dying are the best I've ever had. I find it hard to tell you, I find it hard to take. When people run in circles, it's a very, very mad world. Mad world.
All right. I have just turned on the recorder for the second session on the first Saturday in June 2025, June 7th. And all right, we have Richard showing up. That's great. And I'll just wait to till his face is on. All right. And welcome, Richard. I am just starting up the recorder for the second session today on this
Right.
first Saturday in June 2025. Good to see you.
Yeah. Just yeah, I missed the one this morning because I had that memorial service for my friend who died.
Gotcha. Yeah.
Yeah.
So what you find yourself in the middle of, Richard, is we've just been in the first session checking in a kind of an what turned out to be a longer and more elaborate fashion than usual, but we had that luxury because there were just a couple and eventually three of us in the first session,
Oh,
and I really appreciate, Kathy, again, you're asking about the special focus series of podcast episodes that we've been generating around here, particularly with the idea of speaking about the roots of fascism in US government and where did it come from? And how is it so massive and so effective in such short order? And of course, it turns out that this has been a long game planned over decades, and it just happens to explosively entered the scene this year and with Trump 2.0.
yeah.
So that's a good chunk of what we spoke about last hour. And really the main focus of both of these hours is the introduction of a recent short podcast episode from Nate Hagens and his great simplification podcast. And this particular short episode from Nate is about 10 qualities that could change the future. And I'm just going to splash it onto the screen briefly here to give you a kind of a rundown, a chance to just at least see the list, Richard. And we'll talk quite a bit about all of the list later
Yeah.
on, but very soon, in the next couple of minutes, perhaps after you get a chance to check in, we're going to listen to the second half of the list as Nate introduces it himself. But first, let me just share screen with you and show you what that list looks like.
Was that the one you had in your email this morning?
Yeah, yeah.
Okay. So I did see it. Oh yeah.
Are y'all able to see that?
Yes.
Yep. Sure.
Great.
Hmm.
It was basically 0 through 4 that we covered pretty well in just having Nate speak about what his version of or understanding of this list is. And we're going to be finishing up with the last 5 through 10 of that list in this coming
Yeah.
between an hour and hour and a half. And I'm wondering, Richard, if you would like to just check in briefly with us and let us know how you're doing and get yourself more present and settled if you'd like.
Sure. Well, let's see. It's been a pretty chaotic, crazy week, starting with news of my friend's death and then going through a bunch of other things during the week, and then today going to the actual, ceremony or funeral. It wasn't really a funeral. I guess they call it a celebration of life. Yeah,
Mhm.
right. Yeah, it was pretty nice. People gave some really good talks and little speeches and shared things that they remembered about John, and they had a real nice slideshow, which was very touching, actually.
Mm.
So it was good. It wasn't crazy long either. It was less than an hour and a half, which I appreciated.
Mm.
Uh, and I don't know, aside from that, it's just been a very strange week. I mean, intense to the point where I was supposed to get together with a friend of mine who I haven't seen in a while tomorrow, and I just had to call her and beg off and say, hey, I just had such a crazy, stressful week. I need to take tomorrow for myself. I'm not even going to get together with you. Let's rearrange it. She understood, but still, I mean, I don't do that very often.
Mhm.
So well, that's all I need to say. I'm doing all right.
Well, thank you. And it's good to see you. And,
Well, I
Be
just
here.
wanted to say that I've attended one other of these wonderful meetings, and I was paired with you, Richard, and
Oh yeah.
I take medium, and I looked you up immediately. And this morning read the United States of Astounding Awful Absurdity, and I have
Yeah.
enjoyed all of your medium columns, and I just wanted to thank you for that.
Oh, great. Cool. Yeah. Well, glad you like them.
Yes, I sure do.
Good. Yeah. Well, I'm trying to tell the truth as best I can.
Well, it's wonderful when you read and you just go, "Wow, this is just right out of my own head," but I couldn't say it as well.
Mhm.
That's cool. I mean, I've heard that from a couple of people. Yeah, that's neat. Yeah, thanks.
You're welcome.
Yeah. All right. So again, we're going to start up the second half of Nate's 10 qualities list. And I'm going to include a little bit of a recap, a little bit of the tail end of what he describes in number 4 on his list, co-regulation, which is really a specific focus on what can be called polyvagal theory, and basically an advanced level understanding of what goes on in our body when we are able to settle in to a fully relaxed or regulated state, when we're able to um, diffuse that kind of anxiety or depression or trauma or whatever can be a very regular experience these days in daily living, when we get a chance to truly be connected with one another and with perhaps with the web of life itself, there's a very different experience of being alive that I think he's ends up pointing to. So I'm just going to set it up so that he speaks that particular aspect a little bit more, and then he'll go on to items 5 through 10. So off we go.
Co-regulation. With others, you gain strength, vitality, purpose, and vagal co-regulation of your nervous system. Polyvagal theory, which I'm hoping to find an expert guest to talk about this, because I've been discussing it with my craniosacral therapist. But polyvagal theory tells us that safety is not a thought, it's a feeling. And co-regulation in our bodies happens when we are seen, when we're heard, and when we are accompanied and respected. It's not just emotional, it's biological. Heart rate variability, the vagal tone, mirror neuron activity all improve in trust-based relationships, and groups and ultimately cultures that are built on co-regulation are going to outperform those that are based on competition. Because trust scales. And this gets back to David Sloan Wilson's and E.O. Wilson's multi-level selection theory, where individuals, selfish individuals outcompete altruistic individuals within groups, but that altruistic groups outcompete selfish groups. And it's along these lines, co-regulation. The next theme, the fifth theme for the mitochondria people, Homo sapiens alive today, is systems thinking or wide boundary thinking. Our ancestors largely focused on local cause and effect, but today's problems, climate feedback, financial contagion, supply chains, polarization, AI, algorithms, all that require nonlinear cognition. So to think systemically is to notice feedbacks, delays, thresholds. It's also, at a wider, even a wider boundary sense, it's to stop blaming individuals for structural problems. So there's a little bit of a spaciousness and empathy and tolerance there. And also that the systems lens invites humility. We're each nodes in something vastly more complex than we see with the naked eye. So to expand your ability for uncertainty and view the world in probabilities, given the systemic backdrop, is also part of this frame. Next is restraint. And I mean this in two ways. This trait of restraint sounds radical in a culture of more, which we have today. So saying no to consumption or convenience, or to what could be described as corrupted or even unethical norms of our current culture, is an act of personal sovereignty. It's rewilding the self into alignment with our biophysical reality. It's also a signal that you can't be bought or baited. So the ability to muzzle your own ghost of dopamine past to the smorgasbord of supernormal stimuli we have today, but also to say no in cultural situations where something is off, something is wrong. Stand up, have the restraint, and say no. I think the mitochondria of the future will require such a trait. Next is status free, or status aware and status free, because the current economic superorganism thrives on hierarchy, image, identity, and constant comparison of yourself to others. And escaping the grip of this is going to require divorcing your self-worth from the status ladder and recognizing the futility of chasing all these likes and social approval and stimulation. It is really the rat race of our times. A post-superorganism human, the mitochondria that I'm hypothesizing, will seek depth as opposed to display. And remember that no one wins a game that's designed to devour its players. So being intrinsically motivated instead of externally validated would be a trait in this sea of humanity surrounding Marvin Harris's hierarchy. Number 8 is recognizing, feeling, beyond knowing, but actually feeling how interconnected we are to the web of life of Earth. Indigenous worldviews and deep ecology tell us what science now confirms, that life is relational. The human microbiome, the Gaia hypothesis, Earth system science, all confirm this. And to live with an interconnected worldview shifts from ego to eco, and it generates compassion, long-term thinking, and ethical coherence. You know, ultimately, I love nature, but we don't protect nature because it's sacred. We protect it because we are it. This is also something that shifted for me in the last few years, especially the last year. I've loved nature and the biosphere and animals and organisms my entire life. But I was looking at them from me. And now when I go out in the forest or I go for a hike or I go to my sit spot, I do truly feel like I'm meshing in, merging in with the ecosystem. I feel interconnected. I don't just know that I'm interconnected. And I think this is an important trait that more and more people are starting to feel. Number 9, emergence. In chaos theory, sensitive dependence on the initial conditions of a situation means that small changes in those initial conditions can create vast outcomes in the future. This is the heart of the concept of emergence. And I think a lot more people need to take an aerial view and without trying to have binary success, failure goals. And rather than aiming for final outcomes, we alter the conditions, relationships, norms, incentives today, now. And I think thinking in an emergent way and not being wed to certain outcomes frees us from purity and perfectionism and invites curiosity, iteration, and experimentation on the things that we do. The future is not planned, it's seeded, and we are seeding it now with these conversations. So I just don't think it's a black and white, block and tackle, get this thing done. We are changing the initial conditions of the next period. And then the next period, people, maybe us, maybe you, viewers of this show, will change the initial conditions for the next period. And all of a sudden, 3 periods from now, some pathways are open to us that weren't before. Last but not least is play and joy. And this one's optional, but powerful. Also something I've learned personally, so I'm throwing it in here. Number 10 is the ability to hold the gravity of collapse, or the great simplification, if you prefer, and retain levity and music and play and joy. Because humor is a survival trait, and it creates space, it builds resilience in groups, and it keeps the heart supple and your body and mind young. I think integrating levity, play, and joy into your life, despite the circumstances, or probably because of the circumstances, would be one of the characteristics, one of the traits of the emergent mitochondria of the next culture. So, again, I'm no expert on these things. I just think that this is not a bad quiver of arrows to aspire to play a different role in our culture as things become a little bit more chaotic and nonlinear and topsy-turvy. These traits aren't boxes to check, they're muscles to grow. And begin where you are. I'm on the path on many of these I just listed, and I'm just at the starting gate on many others. We don't need millions of people to be perfect. We don't need millions of people to sign up to all this, but we do need some people to live and think and act in different ways so that new seeds are planted in the rubble of this failing system. If you don't believe this system is failing, stick around, because next week's, frankly, is going to be the 10 major flaws that are still being taught in business schools, if I get it done in time. The people who carry some or most or all of these traits that I mentioned here, who live with groundedness and grief and restraint and joy, are not fringe in our society. They are the scout team. They're needed to prepare the ground and to steady the heart during the great simplification, and to seed some sort of post-collapse possibilities that will become the roots of a new, hopefully more sapient, livable culture. And to be honest, even if we didn't face the meta crisis, shouldn't we all be living this way anyways? I'll close with a quote that I often use by Ilya Prigogine. When a complex system is far from equilibrium, small islands of coherence in a sea of chaos have the capacity to shift the entire system to a higher order. I'll adapt that here to point out that the islands of coherence start with individuals and small groups. How could they not? Culture doesn't change by decree. It changes by mitochondria, us. Thank you. I will talk to you next week.
All right.
What's his name again?
That's Nate Hagens.
Oh yeah, I've heard him before. Yeah.
Yeah. He's been immensely prolific for the past 3 or so years since he started up his podcast. And I'm loath to be critical of him at all, because he's just done immensely great and positive work. And quite quickly, he became part of the fire hose to the face that I complain about, even with the great material that I really
Right.
want to watch and listen to. And I'm very, very thankful that he has really taken on his own personal work to slow down, to reduce the quantity of content and so on. And I think it shows up really beautifully in his presence, in this video, for instance. So yeah, his podcast is called the uh, Great Simplification. If anybody wants kind of an already a pre-filtered um, stack of links to kind of get familiar with his work to date, I've got a small handful that I think have really been the gold nuggets that I would not want to be without.
Hmm.
So if that's helpful, I'm happy to offer that. Otherwise, dive in. It's right there on his YouTube channel.
Yeah.
I'm tempted to put into the chat the 10 qualities, and I'll just see how well I'm able to do that in translating between a Word document and the chat. Because I'd like for us to all kind of tiptoe through the tulips here. I'd like to see us all one at a time share how we feel we're doing with regard to each of these 10 qualities. And can you all see the list in the chat? Is that showing up?
I just pulled it up in my email so I can see it in my own email.
Okay, great.
Yeah.
So, really my question for us here is particularly pointed to you both in terms of feedback. Richard, what you just sort of missed the earlier. I laid out some of my reasoning of why I wanted to include Nate's list, because I'm not just including it here in this particular Saturday of this particular month of this year-long course. I'm actually going to be including some version of this video and a worksheet that I'm putting together as a Google Doc for people to reference every month if they so choose. So they could relook at this list and see how am I doing with regard to these 10 qualities. I'm also looking at adapting the list because there are straight away a couple of things that I'd like very much to add that I think are just not on Nate's screen. And I'm also very curious if either of you would suggest additions or perhaps editing out or changing anything that Nate's put on his list already. So, with your permission, I'd like to just start out from, go from 1 through 10, having each of us just give each other a sense of how we feel that particular quality is alive in our lives right now or is not alive for us individually. But before we start that process, is there anything that either of you would just like to say as a whole experience of what you've experienced so far of Nate's list as a possible part of our shared language here in living resilience, in this community of practice, and also in the Islands of Sanity course? Is there anything that you're prompted to share or say after hearing what Nate's been talking about?
I have a kind of reaction, I guess. I don't know if I'm being too critical or what, but I mean, it seems to me that a lot of these things are, actually pretty obvious in terms of things we need to be doing for ourselves just to, maintain our humanity in a weird time like this.
Mhm.
Um, I guess it helps to spell them out. Um, it's hard for me to express this. It's like what I'm most concerned about right now is like this sort of mass insanity that seems to be spreading. I guess we could call it Wetiko or whatever, but it seems to be firmly in control now. And, all these things on that list are good and necessary, but, my bigger question is like, how the hell do we deal with this spreading Wetiko madness, And obviously the two things are connected, but somehow, I don't know. I guess I don't see enough of that in what he's saying. Well, he's talking about changing the future, so what I'm talking about is more like, okay, changing the future would be nice, but how do we deal with the present? You know, that's kind of where I'm coming from.
Okay.
Not sure how we can work that in, but I'm sure it'll be part of our discussion, actually.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree. It definitely will. I have my own version of what I think you're pointing at, Richard. Um, and I've got to just say that, my experience of Nate Hagens is that during these 3 years, he went from a guy who years back got started in the Wall Street and investment banking world. Uh-oh, you look like you're frozen. Am I frozen as well? I don't know. So anyway, Nate Hagens went from
Yeah, you were frozen there for like 15 seconds.
okay. I think my recorder is still got me going on, but I hear you,
Now you're good. Now you're good.
I'm gonna just keep going.
Yep.
So Nate Hagens started out in the Wall Street and investment banking world, and then he shifted into the exploration of with a focus on energy, on
Hmm.
stocks and investment and with regard to energy, and that eventually shifted into what is this what are the troubles going on in the world that happen to be focused on this overlap of this global economy and our use of energy, and that has eventually shifted into he's been a college professor, and he's been teaching young people about these issues of economics and energy and so on
Hmm.
for years.
Uh,
So, but it's only in the past year or so that he's really been bringing in the human element, these
uh,
more controversial areas that we are up to our earlobes in now. Like we have a fascist dictatorship now running the USA. What do we do with that? Which is an overlap with what I was hearing you suggest, Richard, just a moment ago.
yep.
So again, hi, Kathy. You're back. That's great.
Sorry about that. I had to take that call.
Of
Yep.
course,
Right.
that's fine. So
Yep.
we're just really still, the floor is still open. If you have anything that you'd like to say that you're just sparked or inspired to say out of hearing Nate Hagens speak about his list of suggested qualities, um, what's emergent for you out of his list? And actually, what even more important for me personally is what's emergent for you as you imagine yourself contributing to a shared language, but not only for yourself and your immediate loved ones, but perhaps in expanded rings of community where we could imagine if we could have a local community conversation about the issues that are so breathing down our neck, from environment to politics and so on. So I think this is a possibility of creating a shared language for how we can be more effective and more alive and present, even in stressful conversations. So I'll be quiet now. And if either of you have something that you'd like to share about this topic of generating a shared language, please. What do you got?
Well, I was looking at number 6 here, restraint. And, I feel like I practice that in a lot of ways in my own life. I mean, for instance, I've never had a smartphone, and it's, causes me some inconvenience, yet I really don't want one. And I really don't want to be at the mercy of that thing. So, I've just never had one, and I'm fine with that. Although it does create a few problems. So to me, that's like an example of restraint. But somehow the word restraint doesn't quite do it for me. I think there needs to be another word because, people don't like the idea of restraint or having to restrain themselves. But there's another positive. It'd be nice to find a more positive way to put that, and I don't know what that would be. I haven't been able to think of it yet. But restraint itself sounds kind of repressive and it's not repressive. It's not about repressing yourself. There's something else going on, but I can't think of what the word would be, you know.
Hmm.
It's like just choosing more positive things or choosing more life-giving things or choosing more conscious things or whatever. But I guess part of it is restraint, but it seems like there's another more positive way to put it. I don't
Hmm.
know.
Yeah.
Well, I saw his list as I kind of wanted to take, one by one and kind of translate it from Nate's description and kind of kick it around.
Yeah,
As a social worker, a psychotherapist, I see everything through that lens, and so what jumps out at me is self-care and grounding and uh, interconnected, and anything to do with fun, play, and joy, and
yeah.
it, anything that connects us. I live in Appalachia. It's very remote up here, very tiny town, and I moved from Atlanta, and I'm looking for connection. There are not a lot of intellectuals um,
Hmm.
up here, but yeah, that's mainly I love Zoom, but I don't do social media. I don't do anything like that, the social media or
Nope.
that. But Zoom is my way of connecting, and so yeah, what excites me is anything to do with groups like this group, and I facilitate a monthly group um, on another topic.
Mhm.
Um, but yeah, anytime. Um, and when I'm in Florida, I have a condo down there. There are a couple of really interesting groups of people that I get together with, a humanist society and then critical thinkers.
Hmm.
And so I'm thinking about what can I form in this town. Because there are people around and but I guess if you build it, they will show up. So been thinking about that. So,
Mhm.
God.
Yeah.
Both of you seem to be pointing toward a piece that has been at the core of my motivation to put together this body of work. I've been at this for 10 years now to support and offer resources to the collapse aware and collapse acceptant communities. And especially in these past 3 or 4 years, as AI has been coming into our frame, into our view, and clearly it's going to change our lives like nothing else in the past. Like this will be the greatest shift in human history. I got it. But what all that really does for me is push it into higher and higher contrast. The things that Nate was kind of gentle and easygoing as he was describing it, and I hear both of you pointing to the similar zone I'm about to describe, and that is one that is as far from the hollowness and the artificiality of AI, as powerful it is, and as much as it will change our lives, it is not human. And the word that I have chosen to make it real in my experience is soul. There's no soul in AI, which is at the core of
Right.
being a human is this kind of neighborhood that I roughly call soul. I don't pretend to have a religious meaning for the word soul. There's for me where it is how it feels to be related, how it feels to be a human being. And there's a core emanation or emergence of the truth of my experience that the only place I know to say that it's coming from is something like my soul. And I think that that's what each of us, one way or another, has been pointing toward, that we sort of liked that he was hinting at in certain elements of this 10-point list. And for me, it's still, and I think I was hearing this particularly in what you shared as well, Richard, that you also found something missing. Like he wasn't quite boldly drawing that line of what's on the far end away from these self-terminating attributes that are really taking us down. You know, because I know in your writing, and every time we get together in the community of practice, kind of the more deep dive group here in Living Resilience, your orientation and what you are so able to articulate is the deeply human element that is so not present whenever we're talking about that which is killing us, that which is
Yeah.
taking us down. You know, there is no soul in fascism. There is no soul in AI. And so that's just my contribution to this kind of first level of, let's talk about, if not this self-terminating system, then what? And how to, if we do come up with our own little list, our own little shared language of what matters most to us and how we would say it, how we would share it with one another. Um, yeah, basically how we could set up a way to self-assess on a regular basis. Am I tending to stick more toward the spectrum that we could call soul, or am I tending to be swayed into where the crowd wants me to go, where business as usual sucks me into,
Yeah.
which is a self-terminating culture? So I'll just stop there. That's just my little 2 cents worth at the first level. Um, is this a good time to launch into just going one
I,
by one and just seeing what we have to say?
I was listening to you talk about AI, which, I don't want to change the subject or anything, but I get a lot of, I'm on listservs,
Hmm.
and somebody posted that they created a therapist AI bot thing,
Hmm.
and programmed it to be able to listen and reflect back over 100 feelings, and the young people really, when they did an experiment, they liked the bot better as the therapist,
Hmm.
and and so they said, well, why? And they said, well, they didn't think the bot was judgmental. I don't know. Do people think that, co-regulation's important? I think that's what we're after, but and we're older, do are people afraid of, groups or relating to other people? Is um, you know, banding together and talking, and is what's the why would people prefer the the AI counselor, you know?
Yeah.
Well, look, let me share something from my own experience, and this just happened to me in the last couple of weeks, and because I've been in couples counseling with my partner, Darlene, and she's not nearly as into therapy as I am, and I've had a lot of positive experiences with it in my life, and she has not. So, it was kind of like, well, she was willing to go to therapy, but not too excited about it really. And then we did this for a few months, but the point I'm getting to is that she finally said, no, this isn't for me. I don't want to do this anymore. So we talked, and then last session on Tuesday, we ended our couples therapy because she didn't want to keep doing it. And, so, what I'm getting at is she doesn't feel like she gets anything out of it. and she feels like she's always having to like dredge up her feelings and kind of bare her soul for no reason since she doesn't get that much out of it. And so she's got some pretty negative ideas about therapy, but I think that's really common. I mean, that's my point. And then there's this stupid stigma that goes with it too, which is, that somehow you're weak or it means there's something wrong with you. And I was talking to Dean about this in our session last Tuesday, and I said, to me, it seems like the exact opposite. If you really want healing and you're seeking therapy and you're open to it and you want to learn and grow that way, that doesn't mean there's something wrong with you. That means there's something very right with you, you know. But that is not the way most people see it. They see it as like they're going to be judged, they're bearing these horrible things about themselves or whatever. And there's just all this negativity attached to it. And I don't see it that way personally, but a lot of people do, you know. Unfortunately, I mean, even my own partner, she doesn't she doesn't feel like she's being judged, but she just thinks it's pointless, you know.
Yeah, yeah.
So anyway, that's my 2 cents there.
I've got clients who are ones that are single that are they really do have a relationship with Chat GPT. They are doing
Really?
little side therapy and then bringing it to me. So it's interesting. So
Wow.
yeah.
Hmm. So what do you think about the impact of that on them? Does it seem positive? I have no idea.
I just remind them that it has no soul and that it's pretty much stays in the cognitive behavioral type realm. It'll give them lists and this and that, but it's not what therapy is to me. It's that therapy um is different from asking Chat GPT about yourself. It's
Right.
very different. It's a connection with a human that after a while you learn is not judgmental, that is co-regulating you and with you on this journey, and um, helping you to sort of,
Yeah.
you know, asking the questions that help you figure the problems out yourself. But it's just different from, and so if people are going to be looking to this, the AI, I have concerns,
Yeah.
I'm sure.
Well, yeah, I mean, I think, person to person therapy, you get to experience that connection that's what number 8 on the list here, interconnected. I mean, you get to experience being more interconnected with an actual person, and AI might be great at coming up with all kinds of information, but I don't know, in my experience, mere information doesn't necessarily lead to transformation. It doesn't necessarily lead people to really change. It can, but I think that's kind of rare. I think more often it's like, oh, that's good information, I'll tuck that away somewhere and, I'll figure out what I want to do about it. And in the meantime, they just go on living their life, the same way. So, uh, I don't know.
Yeah,
I have a lot of misgivings about AI personally.
yeah. uh, it's like just reading self-help books or something. You think you're going to get change that way. I don't, like you said, maybe not. So,
Well, I mean, the same is true with therapy too, but at least there I think you have a little more of a chance.
You know, I've just put a couple of a link and some words about it in the chat, and I would invite you both to check it out. I would very much like to hear, perhaps next time we get together, what y'all think. This guy Zach Stein is one of the most remarkable experts in the field of education, and particularly,
Uh,
you know my favorite word by now, soulful track in terms of the depth of human connection
Whoa.
with regard to education and how that is very much on the opposite end of the spectrum from the AI version of education and therapy and similar human services. He's just got some brilliant um, contributions to the conversation. So you
Yeah, I
check it out.
just pulled it up on my internet connection there and just it's sitting there so I can listen to it later.
Great.
Okay. Yeah.
So
Huh.
I I guess I'm inclined, but we may or may not get to the point in this conversation where we go item by item and give our feedback or our reflections on each of Nate Hagen's 10 items. I would like to offer you my little list of possible additions to that list.
Yeah. Yeah, I was wondering what you meant by that. Yeah, sure.
And just see if that sparks us also in conversation. I don't think this is the last time we're going to be talking about the generation of a shared language. Man, do we need it. So here are some possible additions. They're in the chat that I would suggest. And one, I'll just read them out. And then if anything sparks you, if any one of these happens to spark you in some way, we can just spend some time with it. And if none do, that's completely fine. If you anything you'd like to add,
Mhm.
that's completely fine. So advanced co-regulation, coherence, and space holding, soul connection with others. That, as I wrote it out on the page, was all one item. So I'm sorry that it's all slammed together.
Yeah, okay.
And so that is, that mostly we use the word coherence when Richard and I are in an advanced kind of experiential deep dive group in living resilience here called the Community of Practice. And one thing that I find every time we get together, and it's happening more and more here in this course environment, where we have a decent level of coherence with one another. Where here we are and spread out all over the country, and yet in pretty short number of minutes, we can feel pretty darn connected. We don't really know much about each other. We've never met each other face to face. So there is this cultivatable, expandable skill set in
Hmm.
generating coherence with one another. Um, then the next one that Nate, I think, is pretty far from bringing up in his own list, but we'll see. Maybe next month he'll come up with something about it. Is this idea of personal and community safety, and particularly that's connected with fascism and also with regard to activism. When I've been more motivated in the past 3 months to activism than I have in my 10 years of being involved with what is clearly an existential concern about what we're doing to our own habitat. We're taking ourselves down environmentally. I have just no question about that. And I have zero hope, if you will. I don't like to even use the word that we're going to pull out of the nosedive somehow with what we're doing to the habitat. But now, in these past 3 months, when I'm feeling more motivated at a very much a soul level about doing something just because it's the right thing to do in myself, in my own system, and how I determine that truth for myself. So I'm not in any way trying to um, influence you or anybody else in this. This is very much a personal quest for me. And it is primarily because there is a core part of me that has always been a very unique kind of warrior. It has always been, since I was a very young child, it always has felt important to me to stand up for those who d don't have the ability to stand up for themselves, or somebody who needs protection in a particular setting. And if I can offer any kind of protection or assistance, it's just been a natural, compelling, emergent aspect of me. And I'm seeing that um, in spades right now. I'm very, very concerned. This is, I keep saying it this way, but this is the real deal. And these raids in which supposedly federal agents are showing up and they're not identified. They won't identify themselves. They're they have no compunction at all about doing violence to the person's property, to their bodies, to the taking them away, shipping them off to another country. This is the real, excuse me, but the real fucking deal. And this is not okay for me. So this is a very high contrast, very important element that I would like to add to this list. And again, my promise to y'all, as I'm saying, I want to use Nate's list as kind of the starting up of the list, the kind
Yeah.
of place to start from.
Yeah.
And so I'll just stop because I could speak about these other elements and perhaps we can later. Let me just stop there and see if either of you want to chime in any way so far.
Well, what would be interesting to me is, you were saying you wanted us to go through and say how we were doing with each of these 10 items, or actually 11 if you include, since there's 0 to 10, there's 11 items. But anyway, I don't think we really have the time to do that. But I think it might be interesting to, if we each focus on the thing that we're having the most trouble with,
Yeah.
like that's where I went with it. It's like, what on that list am I having most, what's hardest for me? What's most troublesome for me? And I think right now, the one that's, and I wasn't here for the earlier discussion this morning where you talked about it, number three, oh, sorry, two. Number two, the post-tragic mindset, post-doom, I am really struggling with that one because I feel like we're I feel like we're in a growing, expanding tragedy. So
Mhm.
it's like I'm becoming more and more aware of the expanding tragedy. And so I'm not nowhere near having a post-tragic mindset because I'm so aware of the tragedy that's unfolding and, happening around us.
Yeah.
Um, so that's kind of where I went with that one. And most of the other things I can do to some degree, or I'm fairly good at
Mhm.
some of the time anyway. But that post-tragic mindset is like, whoops, nope, I'm not there,
Right.
So I'd be curious to talk more about that. But I'd like to hear what the stuck places are for you two also. The hardest things for you.
Kathy, is there any part of this list that kind of stands out in the way that Richard's talking about? Like you either have some trouble with that item or some difficulty integrating it or some way in which you might want to change it or add to it?
No, I was just curious about the whole list. I mean, what you know, each of the 10 mean, 10 or 11, whatever. And what is that? And I agree with Richard, the post-tragic mindset. Yeah, I think that's, why I joined, like to attend your meetings, Dean, is like there's a lot. I'm also uh, paid for Carolyn Baker's Substack, and
Hmm.
she talks about I think post-tragic thing. Yeah, the mindset. That I'm curious about that. I think I would choose that one too, if we could kind of break it down and
Mhm.
yeah.
Okay.
I'll be right back. I just got to turn a fan on here.
Kathy, was there more to what you were just saying?
No, that yeah, what does that mean? The post-tragic mindset. And also,
Yeah.
yeah, I guess if I'm struggling with anything on the list, it would certainly be play and joy.
Right.
Yeah, me too, some of the time anyway.
I'm with
Not
you.
in that space.
Yeah, I'm with you. So if I could take a swing at adding what little I uh, resonate with about the post-tragic mindset and why I put in the words post-doom, because there's been a substantial faction or group in the collapse aware, collapse acceptant communities for years now. It was only about 5 years ago that the conversation shifted from being collapse aware to this idea of being collapse acceptant. And I give major credit to a woman named Karen Perry and also a gentleman named Michael Dowd.
Oh yeah.
Uh, Really just incredible pioneers both, but especially Michael Dowd, unbelievably prolific in terms of get curating from sources old and new for all aspects of the polycrisis and especially collapse of human systems and Earth systems. Remarkable person. So you might want to just jot down Michael Dowd and his post-doom conversations. He did 50 or something
Mm.
interviews with substantial thought leaders around this notion of what would it be like to be collapse acceptant. In other words, post-doom, after wrestling with and struggling and resisting the idea of collapse awareness, is there this extraordinary state that we can reach together of collapse acceptance or post-tragic, which is, I believe, almost interchangeable. In my many conversations with Carolyn Baker and with Michael Dowd and others, I believe the essence of the distinction is the same. Is is there a way that we can free up some amount of our presence, some amount of our attention, some amount of our dysregulation? Is there a way we can disarm some of that dysregulation by coming to a place of just accepting what is? Like we are a culture, a global culture in collapse. It's in motion. And so that's truly accepting that location for us as a proposition has a real possibility of freeing up a, a different way of relating, a different way of thinking, a different way of feeling, and possibly other tracks of possibility are available, says this idea of collapse acceptance, if we were to fully invite the reality that we are in and not resist it. So that's all I could add to what you both have said about this kind of troubling item. What's this post-tragic thing? Yeah. Anything
Well,
more from either of
I,
you about that?
sorry, what?
Anything more that you would like to just say or say in a
Well,
different way about your what you're wrestling with that?
yeah, some things definitely come up for me. The main one that comes up for me is this theme of disappointment, like just this really intense disappointment with humanity. Because, I grew up in the 60s
Mhm.
and 70s. I mean, for God's sake, I was there for the birth of the environmental movement, Earth Day and Rachel Carson's Silent Spring and all those things. And we were moving in some good directions. I mean, there were some good things happening and, race relations were improving and, there was all the, changes to the voting laws and, we never got rid of racism, obviously, but there was less of it at least. So, it's like the fact that we've like kind of reversed direction over the past 30 or 40 years, and we're now at this horrible place, and that's not even including the whole ecological thing. I'm just talking about society and politics. It's just, and oh, well, and then the climate change thing comes in too, because we didn't ever do anything about it, really. We
Mhm.
didn't do anything about our fossil fuel addiction. We didn't do anything about all our consumption of fossil fuels and releasing all this crap into the atmosphere. And it's like all we did was talk about it, and we never did anything substantial about it. So, I mean, for me, to have a post-tragic mindset, I would think I would need to somehow transcend or get past this disappointment with humanity, but I'm nowhere near transcending that yet. I mean, I'm just so fed up with people, and not everybody, but I'm fed up with the majority of people who are so unconscious and that we're doing all these horrible things and continuing to do all these horrible things. And we've reversed a lot of the progress we were starting to make. So I am just really super disappointed in humanity, basically. And that pain is like,
Yeah,
I don't really know how to get past that yet.
got it.
Boy, I totally agree with that. We must be about the same age.
Yeah, yeah. Well, I'm turning 74 in September, so
Me too.
you are. What, in September?
Yeah, 6.
So you're turning 74 September 6th?
Yeah.
Well, I was born 4 days after you. September 10th, huh? That's funny. Same age too, huh? Wow. Interesting. Another Virgo, huh? Okay. Yeah, Virgos get a bad rap. I think we're pretty cool most of the
Yeah.
time. But anyway, yeah, this disappointment thing is like super painful for me
Yeah,
and very hard to get past. Because if I really accepted the fact that humanity is, this backward, this stuck, this in denial, this foolish, this ignorant, I mean, I'm not sure why I can't accept that yet, but I just can't. I mean,
yeah,
I'm not saying I will never will, but so far I'm finding that almost impossible to accept. I'm not sure why.
yeah,
That's a big stumbling block for me, I think.
yeah,
Yeah. I mean, I live in kind of a purple state, but I live in a red county and I really thought about moving to Asheville, so North Carolina. So
Yeah.
I'm that disgusted by, you know,
Yeah, and people say you got to understand, you got to reach across the aisle, and you got to understand where people are coming from, and all that stuff. And I've reached the point where, like, God damn it, if people are going to be this stupid and ignorant and in denial, uh, I don't know how to reach them. I really don't.
yeah,
No, you can't.
yeah,
That's it.
So
That's futile.
it's just
Yeah.
so,
I
it's
don't have
so,
the time. I'm too old to do that. Yeah.
it's just
yeah,
so frustrating.
yeah.
So anyway, well, you were talking, but you go on.
No,
Did,
it's yeah,
did you have
D.
more, Kathy, that you wanted to put
No,
in that
no, go
thread?
ahead.
I'd like to just tack on to what you both have been pointing at, and I would call this place, particularly your words, Richard, because you and I have been in this part of the conversation a number of times.
Yep.
When we
Keeps
get
coming
into
up.
kind of the deeper conversations around the community of practice stuff, I would call this a basic level of shadow awareness. Shadow individual shadow, shadow collective shadow. And if we are such a nation of denial,
Yeah.
we're so toxically ensconced on this foundation that what
Yeah.
came from slavery, it came from genocide of the indigenous cultures, decimations of other cultures around the world because we could, because we had the largest military, and on the list goes.
And nature, you know.
And so, without any willingness and apparently a massive increase in our unwillingness to confront any part of that. So, with this whole commitment across our entire government right now and culture to uh, decimate DEI, this um, diversity and equity and inclusion, which is basically human connection, which is basically the foundation of what we would want to talk about if we were to really try to heal some of this god awful foundation that we're standing on.
Yep.
And of
Yeah,
course, we
that
can't,
that
we're getting further and further from that as we vilify DEI, as we
no, that's the
vilify human
craziest thing
empathy.
ever.
Here's
I know.
Elon Musk saying this is one of the great bugs in the human system is that this whole empathy thing. Well, as soon as we can get that fixed, so that we're
Let's get rid of
not
that empty, get rid of that
so.
damn empathy, right?
So
Right.
I am hungry for, and I will create an adaptation of this list that will include some kind of gateway for those who are willing to go to this really intense level. I understand it's intense, and most people, as you said, Richard, most people don't want to do this work on the individual level or the collective level. They just don't want to talk about it. They don't want to hear about it.
Nope.
Life is going to be a whole lot better for them if they never have to hear about that again. So I know it's touchy as hell, but it seems like at least for the three of us, we have a little pocket of like it's not exactly our favorite topic, but damn, it's necessary
Yeah.
at some level to be able to touch into this just for our own. And excuse me, I'm not meaning to speak for you, so please correct me if there's some other way you'd like to express it for yourself. But certainly for myself, I to just know that I've done some amount of the right thing before I die. I need to prod into this area to the best of my ability alone, and ideally with some other kindred spirits, because this is
Right.
tough ass work. I don't know of a tougher kind of inner work for human beings to take on than this kind of shadow work.
Yeah.
And I, again, Richard, you and I have had many conversations about this, and each of us have shared our experience of when we've dipped into this kind of work in our past. It's so worth it. It's inexpressible. I literally don't know the words for the depth. This is the depth of true soul healing and soul connection, is to dive into the most dark and difficult spaces to be able to open it up to our attention and to our hearts and to our relationships to be infused with that work. So sorry, that turned into a little bit of soapboxiness, and I hope it communicated.
Well, we were talking about the inclusion, being everything. And I just caught myself, am I being a hypocrite, when I consider myself inclusive and not having biases and prejudices, but then, sat down at the table and found out somebody voted for Trump, I'd probably get up. So am I not, we were just talking about maybe we should reach across the aisle and find a way, you were talking about language and, am I being what I don't want to be? And, I don't know, but that's how I feel. Maybe that's a stage, the beginning stage of some kind of evolution of building a bridge. I don't, but that's how I feel. I
Mhm.
just,
Mhm.
I spent 2 hot afternoons putting out signs for my, you know, the Democrats, that I belong to, the Towns County Democrats. I went all over the county driving around putting signs out and then checked on them that afternoon and they were all pulled up. So, you know,
Really.
I have so much anger, I don't know. Maybe I'm just going through the some stages or something, and then, I don't know. What do you guys think?
Yeah.
Oh, that's very tough. I mean, it reminds me of that whole, I mean, of course, Jesus talks about this too. It's like love your enemy and turn the other cheek and all that stuff. And I can experience that sometimes. But then I would say most of the time, I'm like seeing these people, they're like, we're murdering the planet, we're murdering thousands of species, we're oppressing each other, we're horrible to each other most of the time, and everybody seems to have a need for somebody to, stomp on or to control. And I don't, I don't approve of any of these behaviors. I don't want to participate in any of these behaviors, and I don't know how to accept other people doing all these things. I just don't.
Mhm.
To me, they're abhorrent. I mean, they're really horrible things,
Yeah.
and yet they're commonplace. Most people do them. So I don't know how to relate to these people. I mean, I don't, I hate to say this, but in a way, I don't even feel like I'm part of the same species. It's like, what are these people doing? What are these people? What are they doing? Why are they acting this way? It's like I, I I'm just flummoxed. I'm completely
Yeah.
confused about how to relate to these people. I mean, and I know that sounds like super condescending and everything, but that is where I'm at. I mean, I don't like a lot of these things that we're doing. I don't like what people are saying and doing. I don't like the way we behave with each other, and I don't want to accept it, and I don't want to participate in it.
Yeah.
But if I want
Yeah,
to accept humanity in general, somehow I'm going to have to accept that this is the way people are for the most part. And I have no idea how to really embrace that.
Yeah. If I may, both of you have just expressed it so um, beautifully and painfully.
Yeah.
Um, when I mean, my rough version a few minutes ago was this is the real fucking deal going on.
Yep.
What we're talking about is existential in its nature. And I'm gonna bring up a book, and I'm sorry to be repetitive, Richard. You've heard me drone on about this particular book and how it's disturbed me and so on, but I think it goes right to the center of what all three of us are saying, that it's very troubling. Like, how do I make sense of this? How do I not be the thing I'm hating as a
right.
response to the thing I'm hating, and so on. So there's this book called Unhumans, Kathy, that I bumped into recently that's basically about the process of dehumanizing the enemy. dehumanizing those people over there
Mhm.
so that we can justify the most horrific actions toward those people. That's obviously been a part of every war that's ever happened on both sides and, forever. And there are some extraordinary examples at scale of whole cultures or nations that have decimated or just extinguished others by doing that, uh, by dehumanizing. This
Yep.
book is called Unhumans because it's basically the three of us qualify as part of the population that these authors in the book are saying those people are unhumans. We are unhumans. And another word, another name that we're given in the book, accurate or not, is we're communists. We're
Of
far
course.
left wing, we're communists, and we're the ones that have created the every left wing, every communist revolution that has ever happened. And those are the worst steps in human history, says the book.
Yeah, yeah,
So
So it
we are unhumans.
yeah.
sounds like a
We
capitalist
are,
fascist nightmare.
yeah, we are absolutely disposable. And it would be one of the best things that could happen to the real humans is if all of the unhumans were exterminated.
Right, right. It's
So,
like owning the libs, you know? Have we
right,
ever
right,
come up with anything like that, owning MAGA? No, never. That's a step too far.
exactly. So there's that whole kind of toxic heart of uh, the part that all three of us are trying to express in our different ways of how do I even be with people who are saying that kind of shit?
Right, right.
How do I even do that? And um, the last thing I'll say, because I actually have been so deeply disturbed by this book. It's the most disturbing book I've ever read,
Wow.
and it is so boldly saying the words that I'm saying. It
Is
was
that
one of the person who wrote the foreword to this book is Steve Bannon, whom I'm quite sure you know to be the
oh yeah.
toxic human being that he is. And the person who was one of the most senior voices as an endorsing blurb for the book is currently the Vice President of the United States.
Yep. Good old JD.
Yeah. So I just want to really underscore and appreciate each of us in our own awkward, for me, awkward way of how the fuck do I communicate this? This is the most difficult topic ever. This is entire cultures being decimated, wiped off the planet. And right now, we have more capability of doing that than ever before.
Yeah, yeah,
And so that's what I meant by the real deal. And I think that's what each of you has meant
yeah.
by the words that you've chosen. So
Well,
I just want to point out the white hot
yeah.
core of this conversation. It just doesn't get any more uh, toxic and disorienting for me
Right.
than to be approaching this. And I'm deeply, in an odd way, I'm deeply appreciating being able to have this conversation with y'all because
Oh,
I sure as heck can't have this conversation with 99% of the people I speak with.
Yeah.
So, end of my point, and I just wanted to offer you about that book because if you have the capacity or interest to read it or to just take it on a bit more, that's at the core of this administration.
Yeah.
it's really hard wrapping your head around this kind of how
Mhm.
they think, in like Richard and I were talking about how do we get through? It's like trying to get through to people in cults. And
Yep.
that's kind of how I see it. It's kind of like Robert J. Lifton, the psychiatrist and
Yep.
anthropologist, sociologist guy. He's written about that, how how did they get the Nazi doctors to
Mhm.
practice on people in the concentration camps? Well, the process of, well, they kind of banded together and they were in a support group. They drank a lot, but they just sort of, they talked themselves into what they were doing. It was just, I mean, my God, you know, that just doesn't make sense to me. I just, I don't know how you can go to the
Yeah.
dark side, go to the shadow side. I guess I don't, you're not human. Yeah. They're not human. We're not the non-humans.
Well, what strikes me is, a lot of these people, I'll just lump them together just for the sake of this conversation. But I mean, there's the fascists and there's the super capitalists and there's the oligarchs and all these people, but they're all doing things that are incredibly unhealthy, incredibly dangerous, and incredibly non-relational and just destructive. So, I mean, to me, the best, I wouldn't want to eliminate these people yet because of the way they're acting and thinking. I think they need to be restrained
Yeah.
somehow. Somehow, if civilization was going to survive, we would need to restrain these people and keep them from dumping their shit all over the rest of us and acting out all over the rest of us and the planet. But we're not doing that. We're not restraining them. In fact, we're kind of encouraging them. So that, I mean, in terms of acceptance, wow. I mean, how can I accept the fact that we're encouraging these destroyers? That's what they are. They're destroyers. They're destroying nature. They're destroying society. They're destroying civilization. I mean, they're very destructive and they truly do need to be restrained, but that's not happening. We're not going to do that. So how do we accept that? I don't know.
Mhm.
Do
That's
you think the forces that restrain people are part of the problem? They're the one and the same,
say again.
I was just thinking, just what popped into my head was the forces that restrain or part of
Yeah.
the problem.
Well, that's why it doesn't work to like if we could magically somehow control and restrain these people, that might work for a little while, but ultimately it's not a solution. Yeah. I mean, yeah, you can't control people like that either. So, nope. I mean, that's the problem. I mean, that's why we're in this death spiral because there are no good damn solutions. Wow. Shit. There's just I don't see any good solutions anywhere.
Mm.
So, fuck. Sorry, but
Yeah.
damn. I mean, it's like with cult members, they're so difficult to wean somebody away from a cult. And first of all, they have to want to be weaned away. That's important. If they're not, if they don't even want to, forget it. You can't do it.
Yeah.
But even
Right.
if they want to, it's really hard. It takes a while. It takes a lot of re-education and training and support and retraining and all kinds of stuff. So yeah, I mean, the amount of work that would have to go into rehumanizing, I would call it rehumanizing these people. The
Mhm.
amount of work would be incredible. And obviously, there's no social or collective will to do that. So,
Yeah.
wow, I don't know. It's sort of like this insoluble conundrum, as far as I can tell.
Yeah.
And I really hate that.
Yeah. Yeah.
I really hate that we're stuck in this insoluble conundrum.
Well,
Damn,
it's hard not knowing,
I'm
it's a
feeling
it's
this
a, it's a
helpless.
the helplessness and powerlessness. That's
Right.
a terrible feeling.
Mhm.
It is.
Yeah.
It's good to acknowledge it, but man, I really hate that. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So it feels like we're at a kind of a last pivot point for this conversation. And I again just want to thank you both for such real and uh, deep contributions that you both have brought. Thank you. And I also want to loop back to one of your most recent writings, Richard, which came out of one of those community of practice sessions that we
Right.
mentioned recently, where you were sharing about how inspiring it was to hear one of our other community of practice members sharing about how she could have in one hand a pristine awareness of just how fucked up the world is,
Yep.
like crystal clear. And in the other hand, she has this vivid, immediate, deep experience of the beauty that it is to be alive. And I'm using different words than she did, but I hope I'm in the ballpark so you can,
Yep.
just recall your
You
really
are. You are.
beautiful essay. And and I would invite us, because we don't have a whole lot of time before we're going to wrap it up and we're going to go our different directions. And we've been talking about perhaps the most difficult conversation humanity's ever had to face. This has been a biggie.
Yeah.
And I want to just give us all a chance to just, I'll just speak for myself. I want to open back up my heart and open back up my soul to that contrast
Yeah.
that Fiona was bringing up, and that you were so inspired by her way of speaking about it and sharing about it, and that is truly available to us as a part of being a human being. And the beauty and the inspiration and the soul is so exquisite that it is truly ineffable. How many ways has that been said throughout the ages? And so I would invite each of us to just remember our own experience of that, because it
Yeah.
seems pretty clear that we all have some amount of experience of that.
Mhm. Yeah.
Not every human being on the planet can say that.
No,
I
that's
think there's a
true.
whole lot of people that are going to die never having tasted that, even a drop of it.
Hmm.
So I
Yeah.
really, again, thank you both, and I hope you can hear this in a good way. I very much love you both. This is a tough ass conversation. This is a very
Okay.
difficult neighborhood to explore together, and
Yeah.
I'm very much appreciative of both of you for going out here with me and with us. And so that's me checking out. That's me just kind of putting a closure on this, and a closure bringing as much of my ability to remember that beauty and re-presence that beauty now a little bit. And I'm wondering if both of you would mind just whatever you'd like to share to kind of complete this extraordinary time sharing together.
Well, I appreciate, coming online today and you being there, Dean, and was glad Richard came in. And this is a tough subject, but I mean, it's fabulous having people, like-minded people to be able to share with, and the learning, and that's wonderful. I'm going to take um Hagen's list and think about that, work on that personally and just continue to process and think how I can, I've got this going on, how I feel about, things, how awful, it's brought me down since January. It's changed my life. I cannot get out from under this dark cloud. And I've got to find ways to, and I really like how you ended it, to remind us that absolutely there's a lot of joy in my life and a lot to be grateful for. I'm a lucky girl. And so, yeah, it's just continuing to deep dive and think and process this,
Mhm.
do my work. I mean, the real world, I've got stuff I do and but yeah, I really value this group and thank you so much for
Mhm.
creating this and
Yeah.
thanks for Richard showing up and love keep writing. I love your columns.
Oh, thanks. Oh, I'm gonna keep it up. Yep. Uh, let's see. For me, well, like I said, it's been a kind of unusually stressful week and kind of painful in various ways with a friend dying and my own partner not wanting to do any more couples therapy. That's so I'm kind of grappling, with some personal pain, but also, keeping up with the news, and it's been, like one round of really insane stuff after another. So, yeah, it's good to be, with you two and kind of be able to fully let my hair down, so to speak, and just let it rip, whatever we want to say, whatever we're feeling, whatever we want to express. And that's a good thing in these times because holding it all in is just toxic. I mean, whoa, it is just toxic. So this is a way to detox. I guess this is a good way to look at it. This is a good way to detoxify ourselves.
Mhm.
I think that really, it really does work that way. So I'm feeling, despite the heaviness and gravity of everything we were talking about, I still come away. It's interesting. I still come away feeling better and lighter. So, this is definitely a kind of healing energy of what we're doing. And I really appreciate that a lot and glad I could make it here for the second half.
I
Nice.
like just one more thing about, I really liked what you said about, and I'm going to take this away too, about we're almost the same age, the same month, born in September 1951, I think. And
Right.
so, when you said disappointment, because I remember, graduating from college and how much hope we had and how things
Yeah,
we were involved in saving the planet and doing,
exactly.
we just like off we went, and now,
I
I mean,
know.
shocking. So I'm going to kind of play with that too.
Yeah,
Mhm.
it really is shocking how much things have reversed.
Yeah,
Yikes. Hard to take. Um,
yeah.
yeah.
If
But
there's an
anyway,
answer,
no, but I'm, in the midst of all this crap, I'm doing pretty well, especially when I'm talking with you guys. Oh boy.
All right. I'm uh I'm going to turn off the recorder now